We recognize that the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect the Abenaki spiritual relationship to this land, and we seek to honor their living traditions. We hope to learn from them how we can respect Mother Earth and each other.
Good morning. Good morning and welcome to Champlain UUS online services. This day before the full frog moon. If you noticed the moon last night, it was beautiful. Well, namaste. I'm your worship associate, Liam Greenwood Batches, and our pastor, Reverend Barnaby Feeder, has the Sunday off. And our service today is being led by 6 members of our meditation group who are reflecting upon their Buddhist practices. And what a lovely prelude they chose for us. We'll be led by Nina Smith, Colleen Brown, Bobby Carnwath, Jack Carter, and Marsden Van Order, who is also known just as Van. And we'll also be joined by our RE director, Poppy Reese, and supported by Margie and Jordan Young and Richard Hopkins with technology support. One technical note. Because this service is a stitching together of several individual contributions, the volume may vary a bit. So please be ready with your device to adjust the volume. We'll be ready with our devices. We've adjusted as much as possible. But as is true to life, with some effort, we may be actually able to hear each other. As a progressive community, we embrace a spectrum of faith expressions and socially progressive mission. And whoever you are, wherever you are on the path of life, you are welcome here. And we hope that you'll join us regularly on Zoom and eventually in person. There are some various pathways to connections that can be found on our website. I want to mention just 4 quickly. First, thank you. Thank you to those who celebrated Earth Day by showing up for our work day yesterday and doing some beautiful work outside and around our sanctuary. And also, second, tonight, you can continue to celebrate Earth Day by joining us at 4:30 for a free screening of the film Journey to the Universe. This Earth Day documentary features Brian Swim and the teachings of Father Thomas Berry. And the link is available on our website. So you can link right to the movie at 4:30. Third, our Native Moons book group is celebrating the frog moon with a reading of Braiding Sweetgrass. And our Zooming discussion will be tomorrow, Monday at 7. And I'm leading that book group, and you can email me or get the link through our website. On Wednesday, my husband, Mike Greenwood, is leading a book discussion on breathe, and exploring race relations. The Zoom link is available on our website, and this is an important discussion for us and has been with some really encouraging news this week. Our worship theme for this month is Earth, and you may want to silence any devices that could distract you so that we can be grounded together. Bobby Carnwath is leading us with our call to worship and our chalice lighting.
Good morning, everyone. Our call to worship this morning comes from Pema Chodron, an American Tibetan Buddhist nun who is the principal teacher at Gambo Abbey in Nova Scotia. Most of us see the pandemic as a calamity, something we have had to overcome. Pema Chodron invites us to see it and other unpleasant or difficult situations differently. She teaches, what we habitually regard as obstacles are not really enemies, but rather our friends. What we call obstacles are really the way the world and our entire experience teach us where we are stuck. What may appear to be an arrow or a sword can actually be experienced as a flower. Whether we experience what happens to us as obstacle and enemy, or as a teacher and a friend, depends entirely upon our perception of reality. It depends on our relationship with ourselves. Love is our doctrine. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. Love is our doctrine. The quest for truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer.
For today's responsive reading, I would ask that you join me in reading the bold print. I will read the regular print alone. This is a Metta Sutra, or wish for loving kindness that we wish to spread to the world. Let us be able, honest, and upright, gentle in speech, and without pride, easily supported, contented, and joyous, with few duties and living simply, tranquil in our sense, accomplished and modest without greed. Let us not do the slightest thing that the wise would later reprove. Let us cultivate the thought, may all beings be healthy and live in safety. May all beings be happy. All living beings, whether weak or strong, tall or short, big or small, visible or invisible, near or far, born or to be born, may all beings be healthy. Let none deceive another, nor despise any being in any state. Let none by anger or hatred wish harm to another. Just as a parent shields her only child from harm, so with an all-embracing mind, may we cherish all living things. Cultivating a limitless heart of goodwill for all beings throughout the cosmos, above, below, and all around without limit, may we cultivate an infinite goodwill toward the whole world. May all beings be free.
When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
Good morning. I'm Poppy. I'm the Director of Religious Exploration. And the story I'm going to do today is a piece of a book. The book is Zen Shorts. I recommend checking out the whole thing later. But there's one part that I wanted to focus on. Michael, there's a bear outside, said Carl. What? Said Michael. A bear. He's really big, and he's in the backyard. What's he doing? Michael asked. He's sitting. He has an umbrella, said Carl. An umbrella? By the time the boys got outside, their sister Addie was already talking with him. I'm sorry for arriving unannounced, said the bear. The wind carried my umbrella all the way from my backyard to your backyard. I thought I would retrieve it before it became a nuisance. He spoke with a slight panda accent. Michael introduced himself. Then Addie introduced Carl because Carl was shy around bears he didn't know. And this is how Addie, Michael, and Carl met Stillwater. The day after that, Carl went to visit Stillwater. Michael said I couldn't bring over our stuff to go swimming. I'm mad at Michael. He's always telling me what to do. So I brought everything. Said Stillwater. It's a little pool. I don't know if all these things will fit in the pool. Let's see, Carl said. Let's see, said Stillwater. Stillwater looked at the pool. The things can go swimming, but we can't, he said. I brought too much stuff, said Carl. That's okay, said Stillwater. I'll help you carry it home later. Why does Michael always have to tell me what to do? Carl said. If he were here, I would climb up really high and I would jump on him like this. And I'd do a big smash like this. Later, Carl and Stillwater had tea. Carl, said Stillwater, you spent the whole day being angry with Michael. Did you notice how much fun we had? Carl watched the steam rise from his cup. I'm sorry I brought all this stuff, Carl said. You don't need to be sorry, said Stillwater. Right now, you need to carry. Hold on tight, and I will tell you a story. A heavy load. 2 traveling monks reached a town where there was a young woman waiting to step out of her sedan chair. The rains had made deep puddles, and she couldn't step across without spilling her silken robes. She stood there, looking very cross and impatient. She was scolding her attendants. They had nowhere to place the packages they held for her, so they couldn't help her across the puddle. The younger monk noticed the woman, said nothing, and walked by. The older monk quickly picked her up, put her on his back, transported her across the water, and put her down on the other side. She didn't thank the older monk. She just shoved him out of the way and departed. As they continued on their way, the young monk was brooding and preoccupied. After several hours, unable to hold his silence, he spoke out. That woman back there was very selfish and rude, but you picked her up on your back and carried her. Then she didn't even thank you. I set the woman down hours ago, the older monk replied. Why are you still carrying her? Do you think you've carried it long enough? Said Stillwater. Yes, said Carl. Good, said Stillwater. And that is how Addie, Michael, Carl, and Stillwater became friends. So that story makes me think of a lot of things, but one of the things it makes me think of is that I have a lot of stuff in my house that's probably too much stuff. The pool scene made me think of that. But the story about the monk and about Carl holding on to being angry at Michael, like they went swimming and the whole time he just kept carrying that anger from Michael. That made me think about stuff that I still am angry about, even stuff that happened like years ago. There's things I can think of from like when I was in high school. And if I turned my mind to it, I could get really angry or bothered or feel like that was really unfair, or even bothered by whatever I did, right? Like, why did I do that? That was dumb. I wish I had done something different. Now, I can't go back in time. I can't go back and do something different, right? I mean, that time is gone. It's like the woman that the monk set down, right? That time is behind me. So I wonder why I still carry that stuff. I think all of us have things like this that we find hard to let go of, about ourselves, about other people. And I encourage you all this week to just notice during the week, if you have a moment sometime when something comes up from something that is in your past. It's over, it's done. It might be about yourself. It might be about someone else. It might be about someone you really love. Just notice if something arises that is like something you're still carrying around, and just notice it. Notice how that feels in your body. And ask yourself, what would it be like if I just set this down? Can I do that? Can I just set it down? Even with the anger, even if you still feel like you did the wrong thing, can you just stop carrying that around? It's something to work on. And for many of us, this is hard work. So that's what I leave you with. Trying to set down things when you can. Especially if you're in a time right now when things feel heavy and hard. This is really a time when things come into your life or things come into your mind or your heart, and you say, I'm setting that down, I'm setting that down, I'm setting that down, because I'm going to help myself right now and thus help everybody, right? So I love you all very much. Kids, I miss you. Have a good week.
Thank you, Poppy. Thank you, Poppy. I love Zen shorts, and I love that presentation, that reminder to let go of things. We're moving towards our offering, and our offering this month is being shared with Common Ground Center, an intergenerational and eco-friendly family camp that welcomes a full spectrum of families. So please consider giving in a generous and thoughtful way that fits you. And now here is Dinah to talk about Dana, the practice of giving. Dinah?
Actually, first we're going to have Poppy singing, and then we're going to have Dinah.
Whoops.
No problem.
Sorry, Poppy. Didn't mean to cut off your singing.
Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. And may we walk in peace. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to seek what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. And may we walk in peace.
Dana is the Buddhist term for giving. In one of the Buddha's teachings on dana, he listed a number of possible pure and impure motivations for giving. The impure motivations include being shamed or intimidated into giving, giving to receive a favor, or giving to feel good about oneself. The Buddha taught that pure motivations are manifest when we give to others without expectation of reward, without attaching a sense of pride to either the gift or the recipient. Dana is a practice. By practicing giving, we learn how to release greed and self-clinging. This morning's Dana offering is being shared with the Common Ground Center. Please give as generously as you are able.
So friends, I'd like to turn our attention now to milestones and passages. As a society, we feel we have passed a milestone with the conviction of Officer Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. It was a milestone, and we mark this milestone because of we reached this milestone in part because of the work of Black Lives Matter and all of those who have raised awareness of racial justice, and holding the police accountable for times in which they participate in the suppression of or the aggravation of racial relations. Now, this conviction, we know, is just a milestone towards a more just and equitable society. That is a long journey towards that dream, but we need to celebrate those milestones so that we can encourage each other in continuing the journey. Now, bring those milestones to your mind, the passages in your own life, and let's enter a time of meditation. There will be moments of meditation also interspersed throughout the rest of our service. And in this time of meditation, we all do it in different ways. We're all different personalities, but it is the same wave of peace that washes over all of us. Peace be with you.
Our ancient reading this morning comes from the Buddha's discourse on the four sublime states. Here, monks, a disciple dwells, pervading one direction with his heart filled with loving kindness. Likewise, the second, the third, and the fourth direction. So above, below, and around, he dwells, pervading the entire world, everywhere and equally, with his heart filled with loving kindness. Abundant, grown great, measureless, free from enmity, and free from distress. Here, monks, a disciple dwells, pervading one direction with his heart filled with compassion. Likewise, the second, the third, and the fourth direction. So above, below, and around, he dwells, pervading the entire world, everywhere and equally, with his heart filled with compassion. Abundant, grown great, measureless, free from enmity, and free from distress. Here, monks, the disciple dwells, pervading one direction with his heart filled with sympathetic joy. Likewise, the second, the third, and the fourth directions. So above, below, and around, he dwells, pervading the entire world, everywhere and equally, with his heart filled with sympathetic joy. Abundant, grown great, measureless, free from enmity, and free from distress. Here, monks, a disciple dwells, pervading one direction with his heart filled with equanimity. Likewise, the second, the third, and the fourth direction. So above, below, and around, he dwells, pervading the entire world, everywhere and equally, with his heart filled with equanimity, abundant, grown great, measureless, free from enmity, and free from distress. Our modern reading comes from the excerpted and edited contemplations of the Four Sublime States by Nyanapotika Thera, a German-born Sri Lankan ordained Theravada monk who was born in 1901 and died in 1994. He was co-founder of the Buddhist Publication Society, the author of numerous Buddhist books, and a teacher of contemporary Western Buddhist leaders such as Bhikkhu Bodhi. These four attitudes of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity are said to be excellent or sublime because they are the right or ideal way of conduct towards living beings. They provide, in fact, the answer to all situations arising from social contact. They are the great removers of tension, the great peacemakers in social conflict, the great healers of wounds suffered in the struggle of existence. They level social barriers, build harmonious communities, awaken slumbering magnanimity, long forgotten, revive joy and hope, long abandoned, and promote human sisterhood and brotherhood against the forces of egoism. Loving kindness that embraces all beings, compassion that makes the narrow heart as wide as the world, sympathetic joy that promotes and shares the joys of others, and equanimity that fully includes and pervades the first three sublime states, just as they fully pervade perfect equanimity, truly is sublime. I'm Marston Van Order, a participant in the CVUUS meditation group. This morning, I, along with 4 other meditation group participants, will give short reflections on how our Buddhist practice has informed and supported us during this past difficult 18 months, which was filled with the deaths and disruptions of COVID-19, the horrors of racial injustice arising from our systemic racism, the storming of our Capitol, the dysfunction of our political systems, and the continued destruction and degradation of our beautiful planet and the varied species it supports. Colleen will share our first reflection.
Thank you, Van, and good morning, all. I'm here to share with you today how my Buddhist practice sustains me during difficult times. As many of you know, the cornerstone of Buddhism is the recognition that suffering, or dukkha, is an inevitable part of life. And Buddhism, as a spiritual path, is founded on relieving that suffering through what are called the Four Noble Truths. First, suffering is a part of life. Second, there are practices through which we can cultivate the ability to discern the causes of our suffering. Third, once we identify the cause of our suffering, we can act in ways that will reduce our suffering. And fourth, by living our life according to certain precepts, known as the Eightfold Path, we can reach enlightenment and be relieved of suffering. Suffering has always been with us in the form of illness, aging, death, disappointment, fear, loss, and grief, to name just a few. The pandemic has magnified each of these categories of suffering, bringing isolation, uncertainty, and loneliness along. Thus, the Buddhist practices aimed at recognizing the inevitability of suffering, discerning the cause of suffering, and responding in ways that would reduce my suffering and the suffering of others became a primary focus for me during the pandemic. The idea I came back to over and over again to nourish this practice and keep me from being overwhelmed by the suffering in and around me is what Buddhists refer to as impermanence. Impermanence describes the constant state of change in which we all live and everything exists. The person you were yesterday, the person I was yesterday, have been replaced by who we are today. Being present with impermanence means taking in that there is nothing for us to hold on to, nothing we can count on being the same in any other moment. This is challenging and can be frustrating. It can also be a great source of joy. Impermanence is all around us. When I am in a moment that I am enjoying, I may be tempted to grab hold of it, try to prevent it from changing. That's not possible though, and the tighter I hold, the more likely it is to cause me suffering. Think about something you wanted and couldn't have. Similarly, if I'm in an unpleasant moment, I may want to push it away, try to control or change it, and prevent it from being part of my life again. That too is impossible, and the more I push away what I don't want, the more likely it is to cause me stress and discomfort. My Buddhist practice has helped me to see more clearly what every moment has to offer. When the moment is pleasant, instead of trying to hold tight, I try to rest in its joy and beauty and express gratitude. And when I don't like the moment I'm experiencing, I try to stay with it, be calm, see what I can learn from it, and allow it to cultivate more empathy in me. This is not easy, and I certainly can't do it all the time, but my practice is to come back and try again each time the opportunity presents itself. When I sit in meditation, I watch my breath, follow how and where it's moving throughout my body, notice how each breath is slightly different from the last one, be present in the gaps between them, and appreciate that as I inhale and exhale, each breath is new and offers me a doorway into starting over. What a gift that is to carry into daily life. If what I did today ended up making me feel disappointed in myself or angry with someone else, I can intentionally take a breath and then start fresh with a more open-hearted and generous perspective. During this pandemic, I experienced anxiety, loneliness, grief, and disconnection. The most potent antidote I found for that state of being was my Buddhist practice, and in particular, my practice of finding ways to be at peace with the truths of impermanence and suffering. This antidote reached beyond my own suffering and helped me to see and hear other people and their suffering as well. It invited me to perceive them as they were in that moment, not as I had perceived them to be in the past. It encouraged me to be present with the reality that the ground under them was always moving too, and they also had suffering in their life, even if I didn't know what it was. In this sense, the pandemic presented me with lots of opportunities to engage in my Buddhist practice. I did not do this in a vacuum. I relied on and got substantial support from what are known as the 3 jewels or essential elements of Buddhism. They offer refuge to those of us who practice the Buddhist precepts. They are the Buddha, or the divinity in all sentient beings, the Dharma, the wisdom within myself, others, and ancient teachings, and the Sangha, a community of spiritual friends. Yes, suffering is inevitable, and each of us will continue to face difficult challenges, pain, and loss. In accepting and navigating that suffering, and particularly the suffering wrought by the pandemic, I am deeply grateful for my faith in the Buddhist precepts, my regular spiritual practice, and my recognition of the power of impermanence. They have brought me to a place of greater freedom, peace, and groundedness.
Good morning. My name is Dinah Smith, and I'm a member of this congregation and the CVUUS meditation group. My reflection this morning is about naming fear and grief. My first experience of Buddhism was in the 1960s, and my takeaway from that time was the concept of non-attachment. To me, then, it meant not accumulating material things. That was a neat fit into my formula of life with just the essentials. A lifetime later, one of my friends died. I told her husband that I felt and would continue to feel her loss deeply. Almost without a pause, he offered me a little instruction on attachment and suffering. These friends were practicing Buddhists. I wasn't then. And I didn't understand how attachment's path to suffering connected with non-attachment and the loss of someone so cherished. So I said to him, how can a lifelong relationship end without grief? He didn't have much to say, except, you will have to do the searching. So I've been stuck in the pit of grief many times over in my life. My need to examine attachment brought me back to Buddhism. Traveling down that road, I came to a Buddhist concept called not knowing. The Buddhist teacher Bernie Glassman said this about not knowing, and I paraphrase, not knowing makes it possible for everything and anything to become clear. As soon as we know something, we prevent anything else from just popping up. As soon as we know something, we limit the thing we think we know. We are blocked by our notions of what should be happening and get upset because our expectations don't match the way things really are. My understanding of this practice, not knowing, means observing without judgment. That's a worthwhile goal, and it is an exercise that demands my constant attention. Judgment sits on my shoulders. It's a voice in my ears. It lives in my gut, and it gnaws at my toes. So Bernie Glassman again said, accept the situation because this is it, and change it. We don't have the choice of not changing it because life is change. Acceptance is not passive. The three critical elements again of not knowing: observe, accept, and change. Sharon Salzberg is a Buddhist teacher. She's a teacher of meditation and an agent for change. In the case of paralyzing feelings, she suggested a neat exercise to observe and then to take action. This exercise fits into my understanding of not knowing. Salzberg suggests giving feelings of grief, guilt, and/or suffering a name. I gave my feelings the name ivy. I chose this name because ivy is a plant. It's common, it lives everywhere, indoors and outdoors. Coincidentally, it has aerial roots that attach to trees, containers, walls, and anything else, just like the feelings of suffering, grief, and guilt. When those immobilizing feelings show up at the door of my life, I put the concept of not knowing back to work. I invite Ivy into my house for a short visit, maybe a cup of tea. I don't give Ivy the run of the house, and I don't let her get comfortable. I observe my feelings without judgment as I have my imaginary tea. I accept my feelings, and then Ivy has to leave, and I'll put the feelings aside. Action follows next. There's certainly stuff left behind after my imaginary cup of tea with Ivy. She tracked in mud, she spilled the tea. This stuff doesn't get swept up right away. It'll hang out at the door under the kitchen table for a while until I know what to do with it. I might put the debris into a container that grows my microgreens Or maybe it belongs in the pot that grows the lavender. Likewise, the feelings that I accepted might hang around for a little while. Then they'll be transformed into action. There's a good bit of work involved in all the parts of this process. The exercise of inviting feelings in for observation and acceptance is not passivity. It is not doing anything. This active process of observing and accepting grief, fear, or guilt always results in the element of change, some element of change. It might be a small change and it might be a large one. The magnitude of its transformative effect is always greater than the effort of the process, believe it or not. Here's Bernie Glassman again. Accept the situation because this is it, and change it. We don't have the choice of not changing it because life is change. Acceptance is not passive.
It's 3 a.m., and I have just returned to bed after one of my frequent nighttime visits to the bladder relief clinic. I'm looking forward to curling up in my warm blankets and slipping back into blissful sleep. Unfortunately, my unconscious mind has other ideas, and it's busy choosing what topic it wants to rant about tonight. Will it be racial injustice, the COVID virus, or a political system where some of our politicians are more interested in protecting and promoting their own interests than those of their constituents? Or maybe it will be about my body showing more and more deterioration on its inevitable journey to extinction. Whichever topic my mind chooses, be assured that for the next 30 to 90 minutes there will be no blissful sleep unless I can interrupt the story. On this night, the unconscious has chosen that it wants to rant about politics, and specifically our past president. Up comes the start of the story. Now, if I'm not paying attention, the narrative unfolds into indignation, hatred, and ill will. At some point in the story, and that's what it is, I will start loathing myself for having thoughts like this. How can a Buddhist as good and kind as I am have these thoughts? What's wrong with me? The story continues on until finally it burns itself out and sleep returns. Well, there goes another 30 to 90 minutes of sleep lost. If mindfulness is present, I will try an approach taught by the Buddhist teacher and author Tara Brach in her book Radical Acceptance. When the thoughts start, rather than going with the story, I will see if I can identify exactly where in my body this indignation, hatred, and ill will is manifesting. For me, this could be a tightening of my stomach and a constriction of my throat. If I stay with this bodily sensation, I might see that underneath it is fear. Fear that the world will not be the way I want it to be. If I honor and accept that fear, I can respond from a point of caring rather than from a position of fear and hatred. That response may include the recognition that there is an action I can take to try to make things better, or there is nothing that I can do. In either case, I have made this decision from a position of caring for myself and for others. There's another lesson in this story, and that is that I'm capable of hatred and ill will. If I can accept this part of me, I have a chance of working with it. If I don't accept it and push it back into my unconscious, it will surely pop back up again stronger than ever. I was disappointed with President Biden when he responded to the storming of our Capitol, claiming that this is not who we are. We are better than this. I would say that this is exactly who we are. And until we own that part of ourselves, it will keep rearing its ugly head. I would rather that he had said, "This is not who we need to be. We can be better than this." The practice of radical acceptance fits in well with the Buddha's teaching on substituting compassion, generosity, and wisdom for the three poisons of hatred, greed, and ignorance. The Buddha called these the wholesome and unwholesome states of mind. He taught that when an unwholesome mind state arises, one should substitute in its place a wholesome mind state. And when a wholesome mind state arises, one should encourage it. So when hatred arises, one recognizes and accepts it, and then substitutes compassion towards the victim of our hatred. For example, one might apply a loving kindness meditation, such as, "May you be happy, may you be safe, may you have peace." If this isn't possible, then perhaps one may redirect the emphasis. "May I be peaceful, may I be happy." For me, this is an ongoing process. Sometimes I'm successful, and many times I'm not. But even when I'm not, and I've spent a lot of time indulging my perceived injuries, there comes a time when I can say enough and bring myself back to this unknowable now. Let me end on a high note by telling you that so far, all of my trips to the Bladder Relief Clinic have been successful. May they continue so, and may all beings be happy, may all beings be safe, may all beings try and find true and lasting peace. Be well.
Hi, I'm Jack Carter, and I'm talking about the impermanence of life and nature. The principle of impermanence helps me in negotiating troubling times. Impermanence is a very complex as well as at the same time a simple concept. The simplicity aspect is that whatever I'm talking about or thinking about, as politics, COVID, climate change, relationships, situations in life, your and other physical life, etc., 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 it is not permanent in respect to the Earth's nature's existence and timeline. Nature continually moves on every second, minute, hour, day, year, and more. The only idea that is permanent is that nature is changing continually. The concept of permanence is a two-sided coin. Impermanence can ease us through times of change, positive and negative. On each situation in the here and now, the coin balances on its edge. It can fall. Either way, good as well as bad. With each new situation, the coin is again found on its edge, and hence the saying, "This too will pass." Keep in mind, the businesses you build, the friendships form, the marriages, loves, relationships with your children will change and cease over time. I have found that acceptance of the inevitability of change frees me from attachment, or at least attempts to free me from the attachments to cravings, achievements, or desires. Just as all the relationships and life situations change, the pain from the loss or the elixir of happiness have an end point at some given time. As one door closes, others open. We can take solace in the fact that pain from loss or the good feeling from happiness both will not be forever. It will change. We will change. Our circumstances will change. Life will bring us new experiences, new relationships, new sets of impermanence, or the end of the cycle. Change is inevitable. It's natural. Only nature will exist and survive forever, or maybe not. So at this point, all has been said about impermanence that really can be said. This is the simplistic side of the coin. The complex side of the coin is more difficult to understand. It is the life itself. One's life is a constant state of flux. Friends move, jobs dissolve, people come and go, life and death continually move on. Solutions beyond our control are in control. Medical problems, changing homelessness as well as death. Medical problems causing homelessness as well as death. It is learning to cope with what has been dealt us. Equanimity. They say death and taxes are the only constant, but I would add change. Change is inevitable. We can embrace it, breathe into it, allow it, or we can fight it. But whatever we do, change will happen. Change is not concerned with how it affects us any more than tides of the ocean are concerned with the effects of the shoreline. Tides just keep coming in and they go. Impermanence is like the tide. It does its thing and it allows us to work out our lives around it. Understanding, embracing, and traveling with the flow gives us the only freedom we have. That is the control of myself and my reactions. The laws of impermanence give us freedom and comfort. It allows you to breathe deeply into our belly, knowing that everything will pass, including ourselves. Reacting more forceful is not about meeting with reactionary force, but allowing the wave of life to overcome. Letting life work its magic, even if it's unclear to us at the moment. That does not mean lay over dead and without the effort to better mankind within peaceful and considerate means. But impermanence encourages us to not be attached to our efforts to improve life or humanity by peaceful means, and to engage to improve without attachment to the outcome. As it turns out, the only tool that is not affected by change is the act of sitting, or zazen, watching your breath and working on being conscious to the illustrious here and now. This art does not change, but it can change you. The Buddha realized as a prince, suffering, which is dukkha, exists in the form of old age, death, illness, and poverty. These forms show us the nature of impermanence. The happy side, or sad, of the coin can flip at any time. We must recognize and accept the fact and live with the flow. Our best endeavor is to recognize and practice through awareness of the here and now and watching our breath in the procedure of simply sitting to try to realize the normalcy of impermanency in ourselves and outside ourselves. Just like Vermont weather, if you don't like the weather now, wait. Likewise, if your here now is not pleasant for you, meditate and breathe and wait for the coin to flip. Change is constant, impermanence is constant.
Hi, I'm Bobby Carnwath, and I'm going to talk about how Buddhism helps me find joy in an uncertain world. Lately, it seems like the news is just a record of our losses. Loss of decency and dignity to greed, of human life to drought, war, and COVID, and of plants and animals to exploitation and extinction. While the Buddha taught us that our mindful response to world events is critical to our goal of relieving suffering in ourselves and others, he also taught that we exist only in the here and now, and we know reality only by what is perceived by our senses at any given moment. Driven by a need to touch base with a reality that was different from what was in the news, Jack and I gave ourselves permission to put politics and mortality statistics on the back burner for at least a few hours a day. The best way for me to change my focus has always been to spend time in nature. The best way for us to do that was by settling in at our place in Vinyl Haven, an island in Penobscot Bay that is sprinkled with nature preserves, including one at our backyard. Life seems simpler there, perhaps because the rhythm of the tide and the location of the sunset on the curved horizon are the clock and calendar, perhaps because our life there involves a lot of chop wood, carry water. Literally. In Maine, we walk miles of nature trails every day, some marked by paint dabs on trees, some marked only by deer droppings. I began noticing patterns and colors on the smooth rocks beneath my feet. Crusty life forms in a variety of different shapes and shades were growing on the bare granite. Lichens, I thought, but how to explain the wide range of shapes and colors? I did a little research, and I mean a little. I opened the dictionary. Lichen are, it says, complex plant-like organisms made up of an alga or a cyanobacterium and a fungus growing in symbiotic association on a solid surface. Really? My mind was spinning. Symbiotic association. For millennia, these simple fungi, paired with algae or sometimes bacteria, have been surviving, thriving, spreading themselves all across the earth, just by offering hospitality to a neighbor who was also struggling to stay alive. Good for them. I knew that wasn't a very Buddha-like thought. Buddha taught that we should observe without judging. So let's say I realized that there was more to these mottled carpets than I had known. As I kept looking closely day after day, I saw Buddhist wisdom. The Buddha said, "Be where you are, otherwise you will miss your life." He said, if we could see the miracle of a single flower clearly, our whole life would change. Thich Nhat Hanh said, for things to reveal themselves to us, we need to be ready to abandon our views about them. He taught, we are here to awaken from our illusion of separateness. Dogen said, the coming and going of birth and death is a painting. Enlightenment is a painting. The entire phenomenal universe and the empty sky are nothing but a painting. He said, enlightenment is intimacy with all things. Finally, the Buddha again. If you are quiet enough, you will hear the flow of the universe. You will feel its rhythm. Go with this flow. Happiness lies ahead. Meditation is key.
Closing words by Pema Chodron. Now is the only time. How we relate to it creates the future. In other words, if we're going to be more cheerful in the future, it's because of our aspiration and exertion to be cheerful in the present.